Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm Vince Nero, your host, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by James Congdon. He is the ex-digital PR, used to work with Verve, and now he runs his own recruitment agency called With Frontier. James, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's taken long enough to get here, to be fair. Just to be clear, that was all on me.
We had a battle, sick kiddos, and the whole thing that goes with being a new parent. But we're here now. I'm excited to talk with you. James, you have a really interesting background. Like I said, used to work for Verve, digital PR agency, and now you do recruitment. So let's start there. How did you get into recruitment? And then what I really want to get into is hiring for digital PRs, what that's like as an agency or in-house, what you need to look for. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in this podcast. Before I get to your answer, James, I just want to remind everybody, you can subscribe, give a thumbs up, tell people about the podcast. The more we can spread this thing, the more I can have great guests like James on. So, James, let's get into it. How did you get into the jump from PR to recruitment?
Yeah, it's fair questions. Ultimately, and it was actually when I was at Verve Search. So I joined quite early on. So one of the early kind of employees, certainly at the point when they were switching from general kind of outreach to more content marketing. And I quickly realized that I needed to recruit for my teams. And I think speaking to recruiters was painful, let's say, when it came to finding a recruiter that truly understood the nuances of what we're looking for. And that said, let's be fair, and especially back then, we're talking 6 or 7 years ago when outreach and digital PR, and it was very much in its infancy. And I think understandably, many recruiters would default to, here's a traditional PR person, they've got 10, 12 years of experience, it's going to work. And to be honest, I took it upon myself to start looking for my own profiles of people, probably quite messily initially, but eventually worked out quite a good formula, for want of a better way of putting it, or certainly a good blueprint for who to look for. So typically journalist grads or PR grads, but then beyond that, started to think a lot more outside the box and looking at junior salespeople. And of course, they need to have a creative edge to them, but looking at those kind of profiles and slowly building the team that way. So ultimately, that's how I cut my teeth. And I actually realized I enjoyed it. I think for me, the crossroads is when I realized I actually enjoyed it a heck of a lot more than being a hands-on SEO and digital PR, to be honest with you. So I think that was a turning point. I think the founder, Lisa, at the time will tell you that I used to engineer every single way that I could to do the recruitment for the business over being hands-on anymore. So it was a strange side business for a period of time, if I'm honest. It could quite not a very well kept secret as well, because again, the CEO at the time, Lisa, was great and supportive, and she knew that I was doing it on the side, but it also benefited in many ways because it was helping me to build the network and meet more and more digital PRs, which would ultimately be great for the agency. So it was 2020 that I decided to take the leap, really. It got to the point where I realized, you know what, I did a couple of spells at agencies like JBH and Novos and helped them to build out their very, very early teams, like with JBH, for example, helping them kind of transition from what they were doing back then, which was less focused on SEO and digital PR. But I think after that, I just realized ultimately I want to do this for myself and never really look back.
Yeah.
So sorry for the life story there.
That's great, man. Congrats. That's a tough jump to make, and it sounds like you landed on your feet. And yeah, let's dig in. Starting in 2020, that to me sounds like a potentially tough time to start going freelance, right? The pandemic and everything.
Yeah, it wasn't the finest.
How's the market changed since then? Have you noticed it? Is it getting more active, less active? Let's dive into that.
I think, going back to COVID, I think obviously when things first kicked off and we were in lockdown, things were on freeze. I think there's no two ways about that. And it did. I think some people began to talk about things like it was end of days, and it didn't seem like the market was going to open up. But I would say halfway through the lockdown, they really did. And they did with a vengeance. Agencies started to boom. I think demand for digital PR and SEO as a whole. People just generally started to spend a lot more, started to re-spend on marketing, the money that they'd been sat on. Because it wasn't necessarily that the budgets disappeared during COVID. They just weren't spent. It was fear as opposed to actually losing the budgets. There was a period, I would say 2020 to 2022, maybe the end of 2022, that there was a boom. Agencies were growing, doubling in size. I think the bulk of what I was doing was digital PR during those periods. I would say today, Yeah, things have definitely quietened down, but there are opportunities to be had. I think this year has been a funny one for everybody. I think from, let's say, the beginning of the year up until May, there were roles and I'm still working roles, but there were less. But things are definitely opening up. Interestingly, a lot more opportunities are cropping up within US agencies. So US agencies turn into UK talent as an option. Not saying that's their only route, but looking at that with a view to them working remotely. And Australia as well, to be honest with you. I've got 3 or 4 solid clients in Australia, all of whom have started digital PR departments within over the last 6 to 12 months. So I think there are opportunities, but they're shifting. They're shifting as to where they are. I think UK agencies, it's not the UK agencies are hiring less, but they're hiring probably more at the mid-range now, less on the entry level, which we'll touch upon in a bit anyway, but less on the entry level, and then less opportunities cropping up for heads of department and super senior individuals to a degree. But things are opening up. But I would say my busiest period was definitely 2020 to 2022, and towards the end of that, so I think that's when digital PR boomed.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about the US and Australia. I'm noticing that just in talking with people. I have someone coming up on the podcast and she moved from the UK to Australia to work at a digital PR agency. And she's talking about how it's not really big there, right? Like it's a kind of a newer thing. And it's the same here with in the US, I think. It's more spinning out of link building, I think, and people realizing maybe the traditional methods aren't as successful. You can't scale them as much. And to me, digital PR seems like where people are going to scratch that itch and fill some of those needs. But yeah, so you brought up the mix of levels. And I'm particularly interested in like those entry level positions, right? Because when we were at Siege Media, one of the things we tried to gravitate towards was you can bring people in college level, university graduates, and kind of mold them, teach them the agency way. This is how we do it. But then you start realizing like you miss some of those skills aside from the soft skills that come from just like having experience working at a job, right? That you have to train them up on SEO, and there seems to be probably a bigger gap. And to me, in hindsight, I would much rather hire people who are maybe coming from a more journalistic background or maybe publishers, even publishing background, publisher sites, because they at least have a foot in SEO a bit more too. But yeah, I'd be interested to understand the entry level position. What does that look like? Is that even a viable thing these days?
I would say that the entry level roles are definitely still out there. It's an interesting one actually, because I think, especially at the moment, as things are getting tougher economically for everyone, let's be fair, I think people are less inclined to use someone like myself for an entry level. So there may be a bit of that coming into play when it feels like they disappear. But generally speaking, I would say there are a lot more entry level candidates that will reach out to me or I can see that are in the market and looking for. And I think a lot of that is down to, again, it's the economics. It makes sense to have somebody that's got at least 6 to 12 months. So there's less time needs to be spent on them. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this, but I think this is how some, particularly agencies, might be thinking right now, in that it makes more economic sense to have someone come in, slightly less training required, less hand holding, and can get stuck into the delivery a bit sooner versus kind of them being non-billable, for want of a better way of putting it, for a period of time. So I think there's an element of that. But also I think there's more demand on digital PRs these days. I think back in sort of 2015 to 2019, 2020, it was quite commonplace for agencies to almost, I don't want to say production line in a negative sense, because I'm not saying it was like a workhouse, I'll get shot. But I think ultimately it was commonplace to have teams of digital PRs that were just very good at ideation, delivering the outreach, but didn't necessarily need to be involved with client work, didn't necessarily need to be involved in new business pitches, didn't necessarily need to be strong reporters, because there was a luxury there to have the SEO team handle that. Or if it were founder led, have them take care of that. But I think times have changed. I think digital PRs are expected to have a lot quicker. And understandably so. And I think if digital PRs are going to progress, they're going to need, for example, the ability to speak to a client. Really, if they're going to progress and they're going to become attractive for more senior roles going forward, they're going to need to be more commercially minded. So, to think beyond, okay, creative idea, outreach, get the link, put it in the spread, put it in the report. See what I mean? It needs to be that commercial sense behind it, the ability to make sure work completed is, let's be fair, in the cold light of day for an agency, profitable or efficient, done efficiently. So I think there's an element of that, basically, is my long-winded way of saying that ultimately this is why a lot less agencies are looking to entry level. It's very short-sighted. I think back in the day, I'm sure it was the same at some of the agencies you were at, but back in the day, let's say, for example, we very much, it was a different time, but we developed a profile of individuals. So we go to journalist backgrounds, PR background, good sales backgrounds, and then we would bring them in and we'd have systems in place to, exactly as you said, teach them the way of agency world to a degree and what digital PR is, and these are the tools. And before you knew it, you'd have a good team of people that on average 12 to 18 months in terms of experience, but were delivering really good work. But I think there's also a lot less time for agencies now to put those processes in place as kind of demand falls on agency. I think especially, and I keep going back to the tougher times, it's not all doom and gloom, like things are getting a lot better, but I think there is temptation to take the work when it comes in and to start rolling.
As soon as you can. Yeah.
That's it. And then, but then I think recruitment can become more reactive, and it becomes a habit to be reactive versus yeah. And again, I know for a fact there's going to be some agency owners that are going to be sat there thinking, well, that's not us. And I get it. And I think there are some agencies I know that are very good at planning, and their capacity is, run like a very tight ship. But you know what? It's also very easy to let that slip when the work's coming in and they're brands that you've been looking for a long time, and your retainers are good, and you've got bills to pay. Yeah.
I want to dig into that, because my next question was going to be like, what's the ideal background for digital PR? But let's get to that secondarily. Let's address those. If somebody came to you, I know this isn't exactly what you do, but say you are an agency and you are working in that kind of reactive mode, be it probably a victim of circumstance, right? Maybe a big client just dropped and then all of a sudden a new bigger client came on out of nowhere and you have to take it, right? That's usually, it's not like the agency owners are out there trying to make things tough on themselves. So what do you recommend in those situations? How do you hire in a way that's smart and going to give you the best results in that short time?
It's a really good question, to be fair. I think there's so many different ways of cutting it. I think, and all I can do really is go back to and draw from kind of the experience that I've had as a hiring manager and on certain clients that I work with, and it works well. It's that, take that short-term hit, for want of a better way of putting it. Yeah, there might be a regular pipeline and you might be getting these clients in that it's so difficult to say no to. But I think if there is that time out moment where you sit and you think, do you know what, if I invest in 3 to 4 solid execs and give them the intensive time that they need versus avoiding that because you just don't want to take time out, you don't want to spend, then I think that is going to prevent those situations in the future. Yes, it's going to be painful in the beginning because there are going to be clients that potentially you have to say no to. But I do think, having been in agency land for a while, and I'm not sure if you'd agree, but I think some of the most successful agencies that I've seen are able to do that. Like maybe just avoid temptation of packing in as many clients as they possibly can, or because on the flip side of it, I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but on the flip side of it, it just really helps with retention as well. The amount of people that reach out to me and say, look, you know what, like this was my dream job. I do like it here, but things are changing. There's a lot more client to person. I'm not going to get to be my most creative self anymore because now it's just about trying to service 6 or 7 clients at once. And yeah, I honestly think that's the only way really. It's not easy, is it?
Yeah. It's a tough, right. The other thing I've seen some companies and agencies do is partner with other agencies and set up like a referral percentage. So if you do have this instance where it's going to put you over a utilization standpoint, and you're taking that method that you're saying where you're going to pause and recalibrate before you take on this new client that might put you over, you can cut or fill some of that like revenue stream by just throwing those clients over to another agency that you trust and getting some type of referral, 10%, 15% fee back from them. That can help a little bit, obviously. It's not like taking on the whole client, but I've seen some agencies do that. All right, so that was the easy answer, James. The easy answer is don't do it. If you have to do it, what do you got? Do you have any tips? If you have to take on, you have to hire, there's no way you can say no to this client. Your business is going to fall. What's the recommendation there?
So I think I would look at your options as well with regards to freelance support as well versus overly reactive recruitment, because that can come with repercussions, right? I have seen agencies take on 1 to 2 people because there's a huge client, but they're on trial with this client, right? So they might take 1 to 2 people on. Let's say said trial, they give it their best. Stranger things have happened. Let's be fair. Like they might even meet the KPIs, but then said client no longer has budget, whatever it might be. And then, they have to let people go. And I see that. And of course, these aren't things that any agency would want to do. I get it, but it does happen. So there is a really solid, again, the majority of them as well, but there are some really solid freelancers out there able to offer support. Yeah, I think, and again, I know that's not necessarily the ideal. And I know that an agency will want to ultimately be delivering their own work internally. And I get it, but it does alleviate some of that pressure, that cooker pressure environment that so many people reach out to me as a result.
Do you ever recommend that to companies that reach out? Just do you have a Rolodex of freelancers that you recommend?
Oh, 100%. I do freelance placements as well. I tend to do a lot more permanent, but when that said, I wouldn't necessarily do it as a placement. I'll do it as a favor to both, but also it just helps with pretty much what you were talking about before. You alluded to referring people and ultimately being able to keep semi-control over what's going on because you've referred somebody you trust. And that's how I like to do it, really, because that way the client gets to see, and that's just one example, the trial scenario. That's one example. But another example might be, they've taken on a particular client and they're not 100% sure how many people is going to be required. It's one of those situations. So again, that freelance, and any freelancer worth their salt will be really honest with them too, because no freelancer worth their soul deliberately sets out to retain that client forever, because it shouldn't be that way. They're really prepping them to get to a point where, okay, right now your execs can probably take some of this because I've got it to this. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's another option.
Yeah. Would you say it's probably good practice for agency owners to at least keep the freelancers out there close by, right? Like just maintain relationships. You're not hiring them for anything, but have a couple calls, have a cup of coffee, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen agencies do this really well, where they'll go as far as to invite some of the most solid freelancers to the Christmas party, or they will be
nice. Yeah.
Or they'll be sent things as though they are. And it's just maintaining that relationship. Everything we do is about relationships, right? So, obviously PR is all about it, but with what I do, and I think people, again, that will have the experience of the industry will know they're not going to be valuable all of the time. So therefore, they're not going to feel put out if you all of a sudden can't use them, provided you maintain that relationship. And I think, that's what a lot of agencies I'm seeing are doing really well. And I know that not all of them, it's such a funny one, because not all of them will necessarily want to shout about that, they use freelancers. And I get it. It's your brand, but it goes on. It goes on for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So let's get back to, in the ideal workflow or onboarding of clients, you are going to be hiring on a regular basis. What does that ideal background look like for digital PR when you're hiring and building this digital PR team? Let's say, I want to do this a couple different ways. Let's say you're already an agency and you want to hire to bolster your agency. We're not starting from scratch here, because that's going to be my next question, but that you're an ongoing agency. What do you look for in a background for when you're hiring?
Yeah. So of course, huge caveat, obviously it would depend on kind of the seniority. So I think generally speaking, it's as obvious as it sounds, people will look to like for like businesses for that. But that said, I think for longevity, I think it's more sustainable to be hiring and developing people. So in terms of backgrounds, let's say if they were just getting into digital PR, journalistic for sure, we covered that quite a bit already, haven't we? But I think nobody can think like a journalist in the same way that a journalist can. A trained journalist can articulate themselves in a way that a journalist will appreciate. Because let's be fair, it's not just about articulating yourself well, which of course is important, but it's also about not annoying the journalist, right? And they'll know
Knowing what
how
it's like to be on the other side. Yeah.
to see it, so they'll know how to present information in a way that a journalist will be able to digest, like in a concise manner, but that's also persuasive. So it makes sense, right? It's a no-brainer, and I think it's definitely when I'm asked to find. Previously, when I've been asked to find entry-level people, I would, without a doubt, look at people who've recently qualified within journalism, and of course, there's an element there of a job needed from me to educate those people on what digital PR is, and I think that's what I'd like to think sets me apart from a lot of recruiters in the sense that I can have that conversation because I used to do it day in, day out. I was selling digital PR as part of agency world, right? So I can paint the picture for them, set the scene as to not just the benefits right now, but ultimately what it looks like in terms of your career path and like money, etc., which definitely helps because it is an abstract concept, right? So if you speak to a lot of people that are outside of the industry, they just will say, it's PR, isn't it? You're talking about PR, right? Yeah, I know what PR is, but obviously it's beyond that. So that's an obvious one. Traditional PR
James,
training.
can I ask too, do you get pushback? I just spoke to someone previous podcast right before this who mentioned he was a journalist. Now he runs a digital PR agency. And he was like, I felt like I was stepping into the dark side. Do you get any pushback from journalists where they're like, I don't know if this is for me. I've been on the other side of this and it feels, weird or something.
Yeah, I do. And I think that, to be honest, that's when I speak to experienced journalists, because understandably, experienced journalists, so to be clear, I think, and not everyone will agree with me, but I think finding a trained journalist that hasn't quite yet got into the industry is a far better bet than somebody that's been in the journalistic industry for years.
Kind of sours on it.
I think so. And also, it's twofold, right? Because they're gonna be jaded to PR, right? To a degree, not everyone, that's a bold statement, but some people can be. But then on the flip side, and quite understandably, they're very proud of their craft. It's what they want to continue with. They've achieved, they've accomplished. So to step back in their mind anyway, and I get it, I would be the same, is a bit of a tougher sell. But I think somebody that's trained within journalism is somebody that you can mold that little bit more, for want of a better way of putting it, and explain that ultimately everything that you've just been trained in is going to be useful and more. Then you're going to learn skills on top, which are going to make you even more future-proof, and like even from a salary perspective. Yeah. So yeah, I would definitely say journalistic. In addition to that, traditional PR, there's definitely nothing wrong with traditional PR, individuals moving into digital PR. Many have made the transition and done it really well. I think my experience in the early days as a digital PR was that very seasoned traditional PRs were slightly tougher to win around to the concept, because understandably, right, it's a slightly different remit. Ultimately, and again, I may be shot here, but there's an argument to say that traditional PR is slightly tougher in the sense that you're selling a brand, you're selling a brand message, as opposed to specific content that's been created of interest for the reader. So anyway, that's what I digress, but that's why that can be slightly more challenging. But people with PR training that are still at that relatively junior level are good angles, obvious angles, but good ones, because ultimately, again, creative, know what constitutes a story, or certainly well equipped to know. They're well equipped to be able to present the story in a way that a journalist will be able to digest, a very busy journalist that can digest it very quickly. But in addition to that, something that I found, and this is more in the last 2 or 3 years, really, a lot of universities, and there are training courses in data viz, so really strong data viz people. And the reason I like those, and I have placed those across the UK and a little bit in the US actually, into agency and brand side roles actually, is because they're trained in, if you think about what they're trained in, right, dealing with complex data sets, which is more and more something that digital PRs are having to do, right? It used to be an option, or like almost like a form of digital PR. Now it's almost quite integral, really. So there's that. it's understanding the data first and foremost, but then being able to tell stories from even the most mundane data sets. So again, they've got that because that's what they've been given training in. So in theory, yes, they've been trained to almost like mini graphic designers in a way, because they're presenting things in a beautiful way. So they would still require the education piece on what digital PR is. But for the benefit of their training is that ultimately they can present things again in a way that's super digestible. But it's that story piece, it's that ability to persuade, articulate, present things in a way that will catch the eye, even if it's mundane. And let's be fair, and I'm only saying this as next digital PR, like not every campaign, not every client is exciting, right? And that's the same with the data viz, that they're pulled in to deal with even the most mundane of data sets. So that's another angle, and it works pretty well. Salespeople as well, believe it or not. Now, I'm not saying somebody with 30 years of sales experience, all of a sudden you pull them out the sales floor and there you go. But somebody relatively junior, provided they've got a creative edge. But the reason I like good salespeople, they have to have that creativity. So obviously it wouldn't work, but it's the ability to persuade and articulate, but it's also tenacity. Because the thing with PR as well, I often find that people often say to me, what is a well-balanced digital PR team? And I think the honest answer is, if you can afford the luxury, yes, creativity, yes, somebody that's super organized, yes, somebody that's good with clients, yes, somebody that can deal with data, but also you need that tenacious dog with a bone person. And sometimes they're not the most creative people. And I can say that because I hold my hand up and say, I think as a digital PR, I think one of my strengths was that some might say pig-headedness, but I would say just that when I say that, what I mean is that, yeah, somebody refuses, so you keep going with another target, you frame it, you reshape it, whereas I think, and this is a sweeping statement, but some of the best creatives that I've ever met they'll say themselves that they don't deal with rejection very well, or the negative feedback, they just don't. So sometimes if you had a team populated with those people, I don't know if you get very far. You'd have some great work, but I'm not sure if the world would be seeing it, right? So I think that's why salespeople work. And then they grow into people that can get better at digital PR. But really, as long as they've got some good content, which again, you need to lean on the rest of the team for, the sky's the limit, as long as they've got that ability to really chase the targets. So that's why I think junior salespeople are pretty good. And again, these are the types of people that I would look for if someone were to come to me and say, look, I want to avoid that merry-go-round of taking people from this agency to that agency, because I think over the last 5 years, there has been a merry-go-round of, let's say, the same 7 or 8 agencies, and people, they are progressing as they're doing it, but the same CV, the same logos are popping up on the same LinkedIn's, right? So I think in order to avoid, that's what I would do. But again, going back to what we were talking about, that I think it's a great ideal. Not everyone's able to do this. Sometimes they need to just jump on. But that's what I would do anyway.
Yeah. So it was like
sales
background, traditional background, journalism, the 3.
Data viz.
Do you recommend that people, or do you do any testing? Here's a test project. That's what I mean by testing. Yeah, like before they come on, I want to see what you can do, because most of these people don't have that. And that's what I found is the toughest thing. Like we would do trial periods, right? Where it's like 3-month trial period or whatever. And sometimes you get a tough project and they're not able to perform well because within that 3 months, because they were put on a tough project. So you can't really tell exactly. So I always go back to the test project thing. And we at Siege, I think we went back and forth with some of that. And other agencies I've talked to go back and forth. Some of them love it. Some of them are like, eh. But I know they do that in a lot of other industries, obviously, too. But what's your take on testing?
I think it's important. I really do. So do you mean as part of the interview process?
Yes. Sorry, yeah.
It's so important. And I think I advise people to do it. And then what I do in order to appease that, as odd as it sounds, is I pay that person for their time. So I'll say to them, look, let me know if this took half a day or whatever. And I'm happy to do that out of my pocket, because to be honest, it weeds out people that weren't necessarily that invested anyway. Also, it gives them that opportunity. If it's the first time they're doing it, right, it gives them that opportunity to see if it's for them. Because honestly, like the amount of people that start doing the task and then they'll send me a message and go, I don't know if this is for me. Or on the flip side, they'll send me a message and go, oh my God, I'm so pleased I'm doing this because now this is the job I want, because they realize they've got a passion for it. But then from the employer's perspective, you have to, because you get people that are very good at selling themselves. You get people that interview really well. You get the most personable individuals. It doesn't make them the strongest strategist. And you just have to. And that's across the board, because I recruit for SEO as well, paid media, content, data. And yeah, I always recommend it. And I'll work with my clients as well to put it together if need be.
What does that look like for digital PR? Let's say, I feel like most digital PR firms or agencies now have that SEO component. So what does that test look like for across those two boards?
Yeah, so it would depend on the level, but I think let's just say if we take entry level, I think what they all want to do is see how they think, see how creative they can be, and ultimately how articulate they can be. Because at entry level, that's what you're going to be doing. Let's be fair, you're not going to be reporting yet. You're not going to be. So they will give them a client, or they'll just give them a fictitious industry, whatever it might be, and say, look, come up with a campaign. And what they want to do is they want to see what they perceive to be a campaign anyway, because there is no right or wrong. They know they've not done this. Of course, this is the beauty is where I can come in as well. So I will very subtly kind of coach that individual. I'm not saying that I do it to the point where, ultimately you're doing the task for them, because that's wholly unethical. But it's just to clear up any gaps or whatever. But yeah, so that, and let's say if it's a manager role, then it would be probably some ideation again to see how they think, if required in the role, but it would largely focus on their management side of things. So potentially it would be a top line view of how they would level up an underperforming team in the first 3 to 6 months or whatever it might be, and giving them free rein to say, in order to do this, I need X, Y, Z. I need this tool. I need this training. I need that. And then if it were, for example, yeah, it's along those lines. It's dependent on the role, really. If it were a head of department, then it would be a lot more in depth, a lot more commercial. So it'd be, tell us how you'd help us grow the department over the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever it might be. In addition to that, tell us how you would empower your managers to make sure that their team are, so forth. So it's basically taking the job description, to be honest with you, and putting it together in a way that is a fast track version, and tell us how you think. And it is so important, but it's important on both sides, really, because as I say, many people, and I've lost count in the amount of people who say to me, look, I really love this role and this is what I wanted to do, but actually based on what I'm doing now, I don't think it's quite right for me. Or I get on the flip side, they'll look at it and go all in because they'll realize it's what they want.
Yeah, that's great insight. Okay, so I mentioned I wrote down a couple notes here. Let's do this one. Management level. Do you ever have any concerns hiring director level, in so much as, since they have so much experience, especially in agencies have their vibe, they have their ideology on like how you should approach clients, how SEO is such a nuanced thing, right? Like Google, nobody knows exactly what Google wants. So I feel like agency heads and agencies have their theories of this is how we do things. Is there ever any butting heads or like concern about that when you're hiring more of a management level? Like it's harder to slot into the agency kind of machine that you've built?
Yeah. So if I've understood you mean sort of political butting heads, like based on their own experience versus the way that the new agency's working.
Yeah, not like the way that you run an agency, but more of ideologies and how digital PR should be done, or how the more experience you get, obviously you have all that experience, personal experience, and the thoughts about how things should be done correctly, or how they've been done effectively. Yeah. Does that ever come across? Have you come across those problems where you've hired or gotten somebody hired and it doesn't, they kind of butt heads?
Yeah. More than you realize. I think it does. It happens a lot. And I think I always say that there's a bit of a grace period where so when I place people, particularly at that kind of level, I'll always check in how things are going. And generally speaking, the first few weeks are always great because people are bedded in. And I always think it's usually from month 2 that if it's going to happen, I'll get the odd WhatsApp or the odd kind of message saying, oh, I'm just a bit worried, and etc. So I'll get on the phone with them, trying to work out what it is. And I think invariably it will be around cost. It'll be around, believe it or not, some directors will feel that agencies are charging too cheaply for what really they're being for what they're doing because it's going to limit them. And any digital PR listen to this will, I'm 100% sure they'll agree, is that KPIs are very contentious. So one person might have come from an agency where I'm always very careful about how I word it because I never want to go into how people run agencies, right? Because it's not, I'm not qualified, but having worked in agencies and seen it all, I've got views. But I think there are some agencies, for example, that will promise the earth and that's how they win the new business. And potentially somebody's not used to that when they come in, right? They're used to potentially having their CEO or founder or whoever it is dealing with the sales, managing expectation or, under promising and over delivering. So there is a bit of that. KPIs are very contentious. I think people disagree on what should be agreed and what shouldn't be agreed, I think. And on that note, sales generally, right? If they go into an agency, it's a funny one, right? Because when people are recruited, it's usually very transparent that the agency they're going to is high growth or they want to grow, they want to continue to grow. They might even want to sell. And it's exciting because you can be part of this or whatever. They might buy into that initially until they get in there. And then they realize, slightly different from where I was because things become about sales. So therefore, our compromise is made on the types of clients you work with at that point. So yeah, I think so. And I think it's perfectly natural because somebody at that level would have been used to a certain way and have been working pretty closely with the founder of that business. They're used to that. They've come up in the ranks there and around that, and then they've moved to a different ideology. So yeah, basically, yeah. And people do leave because of it, or certainly there are issues in the beginning for sure.
Is the fix then or the way to mitigate that is just to talk more transparently when the onboarding process?
Yeah, 100%. And I think my best clients do, and they give me that ability to then be transparent in turn. It can be disappointing sometimes because you think you found someone amazing. They've got all the right skills, but when you get to explain to them what it's going to be like, it could be a high growth environment, whatever it might be, or you might say to them, you're going to be heavily incentivized, but it's going to be a lot of sales. How do you feel about that? And at that point, they might pull out, but it's fine because at least we know now, right? Whereas there are some red flags for me sometimes, and I have on occasion had to walk away from a role for that reason. You could just smell something. You could that something's not quite right. They might be very quick to make an offer, like after one stage, for example. And you think, this is great for the traditional recruiter would be all over this. And they would say, for me, like looking at it, it's hasty. Why is it hasty? Why have you? So yeah, it's just, you're right. It's basically about transparency and unfortunately making myself unpopular sometimes if I ask the difficult questions. And I'll just say to them, look, tell me, why has it been a problem to hire for this? Truly, are they going to come in and actually, is it a bit of a factory in here? I might not say it in that word, but
try to get that out of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The other note I wrote down is, say you're starting out from scratch, right? You're building a digital PR team. I feel like that's, like you said, that's going to be a lot of people nowadays in the US. Maybe you are even a traditional PR agency, or I was in Brighton. A lot of people will come up to me and say, I've heard about digital PR. I know I got to start doing it, but I don't really know much about it. What is BuzzStream, right? Because we had a booth there. But so yeah, there's going to be a lot of people doing this now, I think, leaning into digital PR. How do you recommend they structure a team? Let's start there, and then we can get into, we touched on most of what to look for in hiring, but yeah, let's start there. How do you structure a team?
So, and I always say a huge caveat, not everyone has the luxury of this. In fact, it's rare that they do. But I think if you're to have a balanced team, it goes back to what I was saying before in that you definitely need that tenacious individual, that person that's target driven, that person that will just go hook 'em for crook till they achieve the results. It's so key. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you do need that creative ideator. Now, whether that be blue sky thinking, larger content marketing campaigns, which contentious are slightly diminishing, or reactive. Either way, there's going to still need to be that ideator. And then in addition to that, if you were to have only one person in the business that can do it, have them within the digital PR team for yourself is that data individual, that person that can help to clean the data. When research has been done, data isn't for everybody. Some of the best digital PRs are completely intimidated by numbers. And to be honest, I'm holding my hands up. I was that guy, and I had
same.
it's frowned upon sometimes. Like when I'm recruiting, I will get some people saying to me, listen, if they're scared of data, don't bother. And I get it. I think they've not necessarily got the luxury of having a data person. But when I was at Verve, we did, and it helped no end. And I think since then, I've always recommended that people ultimately at least have one person that can clean the data, can organize it in a way that their stories can be extracted, can present it in the right way. And then in addition to that, you definitely need that commercial mind. Now, whether that be one of the managers, but you need someone with the ability to make sure that isn't uncommon for digital PRs to laser focus on the output and the creativity and the beauty of the work, which is brilliant. And that's why they're good at what they do. But the flip side of that is accounts can get overburnt, and they need to make sure that's not happening. Need to make sure things are profitable, right? If there's one particular campaign that's really design heavy, I remember back in the day, probably being a bit guilty of this, to be fair, with the ideation, is that if a campaign was very development heavy, so back in the day when interactive pieces were all the rage and the cool kids were doing that, I don't believe many of them were ever profitable. Again, controversial, I'll probably be probably strung up for that. But it was very difficult for them to be without compromising somewhere. So whether that be you put all the time into that and then limit your outreach time, which is ironically the results end of the business, right? So again, I'm digressive, but it's keeping an eye on that efficiency, that profitability. You need that person in there. And if it can be the same person or a different person, you definitely need a people person. You need somebody that can get the best from people, because again, you get the best specialists out there. They might not necessarily be good at motivating junior members of the team, midweight members of the team. When people are struggling, how are you going to deal with that? So I would say those are the key.
James, are you envisioning this in the best agencies that you've worked with and placed in? Do they typically break up the roles so that one person's doing the ideation strategy, the other person's doing the promotion, another person's doing writing? Like, where do you draw those lines between that for the digital PR kind of life cycle of a project?
The honest answer to that is it will depend on the agency. And I think the majority, to be fair, of the independent, more fluid agencies now, the way that they deal with that is that they just make sure everybody's got a large proportion of all of that now. And it was going back to what I was saying right at the beginning, that things are changing. But that would be my optimal team if you had the luxury.
Where everybody kind of knows how to do every part of it, at least.
No, sorry, just for clarity, if you had the luxury to have that data person, have that ideation,
Gotcha.
I think the benefit, certainly back in the day, was the headspace, right? Because I think there's a lot of burnout at the moment in agency world. There's a lot of people who leave roles due to overworking, which is such a shame because it used to be their dream role. And some of that can be linked with needing everybody to do everything, if I'm honest. So that would be more optimal. But I'm also fully cognizant of the fact that it's not realistic in all the time, particularly not in certain size businesses. So typically what agencies will do is they'll make sure that people have got a good proportion of some of it. So it might be, or certainly double up on skills. So you'd have somebody that's good with data that can also do the outreach as well. You'd have somebody that's good with client. And most people now really worth their soul and future-proofing themselves are client-facing. I think there was a period of time, some agencies still do it and they do it well, but it's not necessarily future-proofing, is that they would have almost a bit of a production line, for want of a better way of putting it, of the good outreach people. They're doing the good outreach work and they keep them completely separate from the commercial, completely separate from the account management, completely separate from client relations. And from a business perspective, it makes sense because you're giving them freedom just to do their thing. But the problem is when it comes to future employability and you get to a senior level or perceived senior level in your mind, but you don't have that client facing skills. You haven't the ability to put together a digital PR package for a client. You haven't got the ability to sell it commercially. You're going to restrict yourself, but you're going to be frustrated because in your mind, understandably, you've worked your butt off for 4 or 5 years. But that's, I think the way that agencies do it now, sorry, just to go back to your question, is that they'll make sure people have as much of it as they can. And I think when I'm recruiting, and a lot of the feedback I'll have on people will be based on it. They'll say, do you know what? They were great from an ideation point of view. We're just a bit worried that can't put them in front of a client, or they were great with, I can see how they'd be awesome with clients, but their task wasn't that strong. And like, we can't afford to have just a client person. We need, so they would just, I think that in this day and the way things are at the moment, it just, if I can offer anyone any advice, it's just to try and pick up things you don't have. So if you're not typically exposed to client relations, see if you can shadow somebody that is, if possible, because it will just benefit you in the future. If there's one particular person that's responsible for putting packages together, commercial packages, and presenting those to clients, have a look at what they're doing. Ask the questions like, okay, why are we doing it like this? Because you might think that's not enough outreach time, but there might be a perfectly commercially sensible reason why there isn't. So ask the questions, and that will make a bit more sense. And that's what's going to future-proof people, really. I think gone are the days of just being able to do your craft. Yeah, because even in-house, you need your senior stakeholder, you need your,
Yeah, it is. It's a tough, I would say, probably the most successful. Well, I don't know. I don't even want to say that. Like I know plenty of successful agencies that have it very split, right? The outreach team is one team, the ideation team, whatever, the writers. But for me personally, how we did it at Siege was you'd own a project end to end, from the ideation all the way up to the outreach. And that, I think, enables that type of growth that you're talking about, and at least gets people who can come in even as an intern, make it all the way up to a manager and director level and what have you. Obviously, they got to be able to, they got to want to put in the work to do it, right? But I think it just makes you stronger and understand the bigger picture if you can at least be part of those conversations from the beginning to the end and being involved. Yeah, James, this has been great, man. Let's end here. I don't want to overload people here. I think we could talk about this for hours. We didn't really get to the other side. Maybe this is a part 2 of our conversation of, what it's like to be a aspiring PR, getting into digital PR. I think that would be a good conversation to have. But James Congdon with Frontier Recruitment Agency. James, you can find him on LinkedIn. It's where you're most active, right?
Yeah.
Reach out to James if you're, an agency. Connect with James. Even if you're not hiring, I feel like he's a great guy to know, just to pick his brain about all the hiring and placements and stuff that doesn't work out, right? That's even more valuable. So James, can't thank you enough for being on here. This has been great. Thanks for coming on the BuzzStream Podcast.
Thanks for having me, buddy. I'm back too.
Stay tuned, everybody. Reminder to like and subscribe if what you hear today. Please give us a 5-star rating. And again, share the stuff with your colleagues, friends out there. The more that we can get this stuff around, the more we can have great guests like James. Thanks so much for joining, and thanks for listening.